Hi, welcome to Vulcan Park and Museum. My name is Casey. This is Dr. Nefertari Yancey. And today we are in the lobby of the Vulcan Center, home of the world's largest cast iron statue and Alabama's only comprehensive history museum. This lesson is called Foundries, Furnaces, and Factories, Making Iron in Alabama. In this lesson, you will learn how people used iron ore, limestone, and coal to make useful objects out of iron. You'll learn the equipment and processes used in iron making and to identify the various products that iron is used for in the present day. Behind us is the Wall of Industry. Dr. Yancey, can you tell us about this wall?
Birmingham grew because people came from all over to make things out of iron and because of the money made from selling iron. On the Wall of Industry, you can see a few things they made. Iron is an important material. People need items made out of iron. Birmingham is known for iron production. People living in Birmingham used to make things out of iron, and they still do. Vulcan is made out of iron. We still use iron today for things like pipes, skillets, sewer caps, engine blocks, and fire hydrants.
What items do you recognize on this wall?
The things made out of iron that you see on the wall helped change Jones Valley from a small agricultural frontier area into the industrial city of Birmingham.
What are the ingredients that you need to make iron, and what's the process to iron making?
To make things out of iron, you need 3 ingredients: iron ore, limestone, and coal. Birmingham is special. It has all 3 ingredients found here. Other places have to ship in materials, and it costs more and takes more time. To make iron, you have to mine the ingredients from the ground and then combine all 3 ingredients and heat them up in a furnace. Limestone latches on to the impurities in the iron ore mixture and floats to the top of the high iron liquid. This is called slag. It is not wanted in the finished product, so the slag needs to be scraped off and discarded. Once the slag is gone, the iron can be poured into bars called pig iron ingots. These ingots can be taken into a factory or foundry where they are melted down and poured into molds to make things we can use. All the things you saw on the wall here in the lobby. Coal in its shiny form cannot get hot enough to mix with the other 2 ingredients, so it has to be heated on its own in coke ovens. There, a lot of its ingredients are heated out to leave in an almost purely carbon form, which makes it look dried out. This is coke and can now be heated with the other 2 ingredients into their liquid form to make iron.
Today we're at Tannehill Iron Works, a state park here in the western part of Jefferson County, very close to Tuscaloosa County. Tannehill is one of the oldest ironworks in the state and was actually active before the Civil War. So the ironworks was started in the 1830s by Daniel Hillman, who ran it for several years before selling it to Mr. Ninian Tannehill in the 1850s. The foundry here began operation in the 1830s under the direction of Daniel Hillman. Hillman had it until the 1850s when he sold it to Colonel Ninian Tannehill, which gave the park its name. Tannehill actually only owned the furnace for a couple of years before selling it to Mr. Moses Stroop. Stroop had a gift for revitalizing old ironworks and began at once constructing new furnaces here, shipping in machinery from Philadelphia, and scaling up production. Moses Stroop benefited greatly from the work and expertise of enslaved people. A settlement of enslaved workers grew up in the shadow of the furnaces. Enslaved workers quarried sandstone and cleared 3,400 acres of heavy timber for charcoal. They built a tramway to ore fields and saw and flour mills. They added foundries and cast sheds near the double furnaces. They construct furnaces of huge boulders of sandstone, each weighing 400 pounds. They lined end walls, boshed, and crucibles with fire brick that Moses Stroop imported from Stowbridge, England. They fashioned a stone jacket after the early furnaces of England and Wales. They produced plows, axes, and all kinds of hollow ware. So here at Taney Hill, you can actually find lots of different artifacts from the enslaved people. You can find artifacts in the Slave Quarters Road, which runs east between the furnaces and Old Bucksville Stage Road, and in the Slave Cemetery, located about half a mile southeast of the furnaces. The Civil War brought new demand for iron. William L. Saunders and Company of Marion, Alabama, bought Taney Hill in 1863. Under the Saunders Company, iron from Taney Hill Iron Works made cannonballs, gun barrels, ordnance, all the munitions of war, in addition to pots, pans, and skillets for the Confederate Army. They'd load trains at Montevallo with iron and send it to a Confederate munitions plant in Selma. Because it supplied Confederate troops, Taney Hill was a prime Union target. In the spring of 1865, Brigadier General James H. Wilson led his Union cavalry on a mission to destroy Southern manufacturing facilities. General Wilson dispatched 1,500 men under Brigadier General John T. Croxton. Quite famously, in these parts, the brigade burned down the University of Alabama, which was at the time a prominent military school. But before that, Croxton came here to burn the Taney Hill Iron Works. General Croxton and his men completely wiped out iron production in this area and continued all the way to Selma to destroy the foundry where munitions and supplies were made.
I'm James Stovall. I started to work at this plant right here on December the 7th, 1959. At that time, it was a U.S. Pipe and Foundry plant. And on the blast furnace here, we have the stockhouse here. They'd bring the ore in on railroad cars, and we would weigh the cars to get the weight of the ore, and also the laboratory would sample the ore and run the analysis on it. And depending on the analysis of the ore, which bin they would drop the ore in. And then they'd just bring the railroad car of ore up here on the stockhouse and knock the doors open and let the ore fall into the bin there. It's kind of a simple name for the recipe on the blast furnace is called burdens. You burden the blast furnace to make different kinds of iron, and depending on the analysis of the bin is the iron ore that you would use to make the different kinds of iron. And the skip car down underneath the stockhouse here runs up and down railroad tracks from bin to bin, and they will weigh out however much ore that we have calculated to make certain kinds of ore out of that bin. The burden consisted of 20 units of iron ore plus the coke. And so for every burden, you would also charge a unit of coke. And for the city furnace here, it was 6,300 pounds. So for each burden of iron ore, you would also charge 6,300 pounds to the top of the furnace there. And after they weigh it on the scale car underneath the stockhouse here, they would run the skip cars up there loaded with the ore and coke and dump it in the top of the furnace. And I also had a distributor up there in the furnace that would spread and mix the ore and coke even better to get it mixed up good to charge into the furnace. Okay, on this side here, we have the iron notch. The iron is drilled out with the drilling machine, drill rig, drilled out under that slab of concrete there. And by then the molten iron is raised up where it will run out that iron notch. And they will cast until it settles down below the iron notch and no more molten metal will come out. But it'll run down the iron trough here into a ladle off the wall over there. The ladle is on railroad tracks, and the ladle will carry the molten iron down to the pig machine and pour it into the pig molds. And the pig molds will cool the iron and dump it directly in the railroad car, hopefully to ship. And then over here, I have the mud gun. When all the molten iron comes out, the mud gun will swing around, and they'll fill the iron notch or hole full of mud, fire clay, to stop it up until it melts and rises up again, ready to cast again. But the mud gun is over there on the side. It just swings around back and forth. And here we have the slag hole, which they'll flush slag out off this side of the furnace. The molten iron is much heavier than the slag, so it'll settle under the slag. The slag will be at a higher level. So before they cast, they'll flush the slag through this hole here, and they'll either expand the slag with steam and make expanded slag or granulated slag, or flush it into the pit. And then when the pit gets full, they'll put the steam shovel in there and break up all the slag in the slag pit, and either load it into a railroad car, and they use it to make blast for rock wool insulation or ballast on railroad tracks and such things as that. And over here we have the stoves. They're lined with fire brick to have more heating surface inside. And when the stove is not on the furnace, it'll be natural gas or coke oven gas burning in them to heat the stoves up, to heat the air or blast going to the furnace. And then when the stove gets hot enough, they'll put the stove on the furnace and heat the air going to the furnace, and that'll make the hot blast. And it'll be somewhere around 1,300 to 1,500 degrees of hot blast going to the furnace. And then when that stove cools down, they'll take it offline and put one on that they've been heating while that one was on the furnace. It's just a revolving one to the other. And the hot blast coming from the stove comes down this main here into the tweers and is injected, blown directly into the furnace right there. And when they have them normal, they'll have this enclosed, and it'll be a little pipe with a peep sight in it that you can look in and visibly see the furnace working. Quite interesting looking in there and watching all that heat and turbulence and all. Yeah, it's constantly looking in there. You'd always swing your hand by that peep sight to make sure it wasn't leaking before you put your eye up there. Over here, the question was, how did they keep from melting the furnace? All of these are water blocks, and all those water pipes there carry water to the water blocks to cool the furnace to keep it from melting. So there's quite a few pipes and pipe fittings go into the blast furnace too. And here's the stoves that we talked about. You can see the smaller piping is where the gas went through it to burn into the furnace. To burn into the stove, excuse me. And then when it was heated up and put on the furnace, you can see the bigger pipes where it was hot blast to the furnace. And here we have the blowing engines. This is where they generated the air to blow on the blast furnace. We could build up to here at City Furnace Build usually run around 40 to 50,000 cubic feet per minute of wind to the furnace. And this is the way we did it with turbo blowers like this. That piece of equipment up there is called the gas washer. The gas that they get from the coke ovens and off the blast furnace is pretty contaminated, got lots of particles in it. So they'll run the gas off the furnace through the gas washer and clean the particles out of the gas to burn in the stoves, to heat the stoves for the furnace. And down here we have the scale car that travels up and down under the stock house, the bins, and charges the scale cars with the ore from various bins. And it also has scales on it. You can see the scales on it too, where the material is weighed as it goes into the scale car. and then you can, the skips are on the furnace, so you can't see the skips, but you can see the skip hole down there where the skip car will be to drop the burden from the scale car into the skip car. Here we have the old railroad scale house. There was railroad tracks run down through here, and the scales, platform scales, was right along in here, and they pull the railroad car on there, and then the scales inside, the weighman would be inside the building there, and they would weigh the car, and weighed every car of ore that came in here. Everything we got was in railroad car, and we'd weigh everything, and then pay for all the material on the basis of the weight.
Okay, let's review. What are the 3 ingredients used for making iron?
The 3 ingredients are iron ore, limestone, and coal.
What is coal changed into to make it burn hotter?
It is changed into coke.
What is left after making iron?
Slag.
What are the iron bars known as?
The iron bars are known as ingots.
Name some objects that iron is made into.
Cast iron skillets, pipes, and even truck engines.
Who made iron at Taney Hill?
Lots of people, including Ninian Tannehill, Daniel Hillman, and Moses Stroop, and of course many enslaved workers.